Phase 4 of Marvel is officially over, and when Ant-Man 3 comes out next year, that is when Phase 5 will start. And in today's video, we're going to be diving in and ranking every single one of the Marvel's phases. Now, a lot of you guys might be wondering, well, this will be a pretty obvious ranking. Maybe in some ways, maybe in not others. My ranking is going to be a little bit different than what I've seen other people do, but I'm very excited to see your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section, as well as make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you love talking movies and TV, because I try to have at least one video a day for all of you. But other than that, let's dive in to this ranking. Coming down at my last place, a lot of you guys are probably already expecting what it's going to be, and it's not that. My number 4, is Phase 1. Phase 1 for me, looking back, is a great little first phase. Now, I like each and every one of the phases. I think there's a through line through each and every one of the phases, and there's an establishment for each and every one of the phases of what they're supposed to do. Now, Phase 1, I'm mostly basing my phases, though, off movies in those phases. And I have some issues with Phase 1, because looking back, I really only loved 2 of the movies. 2 of them I liked, and then 1 of them I didn't really like all too much. Well, I guess they actually had more than that. So, getting to that point, they had Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, The First Avenger, and the Avengers film with Joss Whedon directing it. So, I love Iron Man. I like The Incredible Hulk. I do not really love Iron Man 2. I think there's fun elements in there, but overall it's kind of a lackluster foray into the Marvel Universe. The first Thor film, I want to love, but I find elements of it kind of boring, and I'm very mixed on that film. The first Captain America, I think, is great to a certain degree, and then it kind of just dies out once it starts to montage through half the film. And the first Avengers, I love. Even though I have some issues nowadays with it, I still really like it. Looking at that first phase and kind of going off from there, while this is the first start of everything in the Marvel Universe, some of these movies, there's only 2 in here that I really care to go back and rewatch. As well as the through line, while it was very simple in its execution, like it literally was Iron Man to the Avengers, and it was a great execution in symbolizing everything it needs to be, and it was the first thing to ever do it of its kind. So I'll never discredit for what Kevin Feige was able to do, but when it comes down to the future of Marvel, I love the big world-staking building and everything that they're starting to do within the universe, so that's why this is at my bottom tier. Now, my number 3 is Phase 2. Again, another phase that many people will probably be like, what the fuck do you mean, Zach? I mean what I say, and I say this because I think Phase 2 is a great little phase that has some minor inconveniences here and there, but overall, my one thing with this phase is it doesn't feel like if we're talking about through lines, this is the one that's more of like, what is the aftermath after the first Avengers film? How do some of these characters go about, and also what gets introduced to this world? Because in this phase, we get Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Avengers Age of Ultron, and Ant-Man. Ant-Man's the one that ends it all. And it's very weird that Ant-Man's the one that ends it all, even though I love Ant-Man. Like, I love that first Ant-Man film. It feels like Captain America Civil War would have been the perfect ending to Phase 2, but then they saved it for Phase 3, so we'll talk about that soon. But going through these, I love Iron Man 3. Well, to a certain degree. I really like Iron Man 3, let's just say it there. Thor the Dark World is not good. It's my least favorite MCU film of all time. Captain America the Winter Soldier is a masterpiece. It's one of the best. Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite MCU film of all time, so that's the best. Age of Ultron, I think, gets too much hate, but I just like it. And Ant-Man, I have a blast with. I think it's a ton of fun. So, looking at all those, I clearly like more films in this than I do the original phase. But also, like, the reason this kind of drops down a bit is because I don't feel like... I think Phase 4 is kind of the same way that Phase 2 was. Phase 1 had ended in a big climactic battle for Earth, all taking place in New York City. Now, going into Phase 2, Iron Man's dealing with the trauma of that, Thor is dealing with the trauma of that, Captain America is dealing with the change of the world, and we're also getting introductions to Guardians and Ant-Man, and then their trauma from the previous Avengers is the reason that Ultron is built because of Tony Stark. So all of these things swell up. And while Phase 2 feels a little bit bottleneck-ish, you get 2 things and 2 ideas to really look at this. It's PTSD and showing the trauma of what had happened and what might be coming soon, as well as building out and furthering out this universe by establishing new characters within the Guardians of the Galaxy, Ant-Man, Wasp, technically, even though she didn't get the suit yet, And then you also have Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and of course Vision. You get all these new characters getting built up. You also get the Falcon within Captain America. You get Loki kind of turning more to the good side. Again, all of these elements building up. Phase 2 is a really good phase. I think all the phases are good. But I think it's a little bit messy in what it tries to do with its through line. That's where I want to get to my number 2, which is Phase 4. Which I think for a lot of people will probably be a lot of people's least favorites. And honestly, if you were to tell me that you hated Phase 4, I would get it. Like, I understand your gripes. I'm in the minority where I loved almost every aspect of Phase 4. Is everything in here great? Hell no. There are some shows in here that were very disappointing. But what this phase does, as coming off an epilogue of Phase 3, and specifically Endgame itself, it establishes new characters, it builds out this universe, it builds out new characters because of the Disney Plus model now that we have, as well as establishing and coming back to our main characters that we followed throughout the original 3 phases and touching on where they are in life, dealing with trauma, grief, all sorts of things like that. There's so much to deal with in there, and I loved how they were able to do it because, of course, in Phase 3 we have Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Of course, even shows like WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, I Am Groot, She-Hulk, Attorney at Law, Werewolf by Night, and Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. And I think I might have forgotten to say Hawkeye, but Hawkeye as well. Maybe I did say it, maybe I didn't. So these are the shows that we got. And I liked almost all of them to a certain degree. I think they were cool introductions to a lot of things. But I think that's kind of like the reason that, and honestly, and I will say this, if the shows were better, there's an argument I could have made that this was better than Phase 3. I am not even going to try and make that argument because when we talk about Phase 3, I have my reasonings for why Phase 3 is so incredible. So, Phase 4, you look at the movies. Black Widow is a film that should have definitely came out before, but I think as a prequel and what it was trying to establish, maybe it shouldn't have kicked off Phase 4, but it was cool. Shang-Chi was a big surprise to me. I was excited for it, but I didn't know what kind of story we were going to get out of this, and what it introduces to the MCU was fantastic, and I love Simu as the main lead. Eternals, same thing. Brand new grand concepts for the entire universe and history of Earth, as well as the Guardians, like, whole galaxy of the nature. Like, that is, like, we've gotten the Guardians of the Galaxy touch in space, but now we have even more. Spider-Man No Way Home was a brilliant fix and really much kind of end to this origin story that we have of Peter Parker. To Change the Multiverse of Madness was insane. Thor Love and Thunder was a great continuation of Thor, which we could all argue on, but I love that film. And Black Panther Wakanda Forever, of course, dealt with the loss of Chadwick Boseman, but as well as dealing with grief, trauma, and showing and really pushing Shuri out in a new way. And all the shows really much give added development to all these characters. And while some of the shows, like She-Hulk, for instance, like, for me, was kind of a disaster at sometimes, I still love Tatiana Maslany as the character, and I think that's a major thing as well. I wasn't a fan of the way that they told the story in She-Hulk, and even though I know that what they were trying to do did not work fully, I was still impressed with Tatiana's performance, and we get Charlie Cox back. So Phase 4 was about introducing a bunch of new concepts, like Phase 2, dealing with the trauma of what happened with an Endgame, just like Phase 1 and Phase 2 dealt with the trauma after the first Avengers film, and pushing these characters forward. Now, there was no climactic thing at the end of this, no new Avengers, and it seems like they're really just building up to that. And I think Phase 5 is going to be a little bit better with that because we're getting the Thunderbolts movie, which I think will be the big climactic, like, build together in that phase. They lose or something, and then we head into Phase 6 and Phase 6, and then we have the next 2 Avengers films. But that's the one thing this phase is missing, is a big climactic thing that kind of brings a lot of these characters together to really show the through line. And while the through line really much is grief, trauma, and introducing, just like Phase 2, I think that is where this phase does get hurt a little bit, but it is added because I think since we don't have that through line, they were able to really dive into each and every one of these characters and really also give the directors something to do. Like, there's an argument to be made that almost every single one of these films is very much director made. And I think specifically we see that in Eternals, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Again, argument could be made for a lot of different things, but I was very impressed with those, and overall I did love Phase 4. Running out this list, and my number 1 is Phase 3. I do not know if anything will ever beat the excitement of Phase 3. Me and my best friend have seen every MCU film together in theaters, and Phase 3, like Avengers Endgame, was like kind of the symbolization of the end of our childhood. Because I met him back when around the first Iron Man had come out, and we were super into that film. Ever since then, we had gone to every single MCU film. He reinvigorated my love for comics, and, you know, heading into Phase 3 was a big thing. So I have some nostalgia for Phase 3, but as well as Phase 3 is just executed greatly, because you have films like Captain America Civil War, Doctor Strange, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, Avengers Infinity War, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, and Spider-Man Far From Home, ending it all. And if you can't tell me that's like just a great run, I don't know what's wrong with you. Like, out of that list, there's 2 movies I'm like, one I'm meh on, and then one I just like. And one of the other ones I think could be better, but there's cool elements to it, which is Thor Ragnarok. The one I'm kind of just like, oh, that was good, was Ant-Man and the Wasp. And the one I'm met on is Captain Marvel. I wanted to really love that movie. I think there's some directional issues and script issues, but everything with Captain Marvel with Nick Fury is great. I think she works better, at least from what we've seen, in a group of people and teaming up with someone than just by herself. But I digress. It kicks off with Captain America Civil War. You split up the Avengers. You introduce Black Panther and Spider-Man in that first film. Then you go over to Doctor Strange in that same year and you introduce magic to the entire MCU. Then you get Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which is more of like a character piece for these characters, which adds a lot of added development, specifically to Star-Lord and Gamora's relationship, which ties into Infinity War. You get Spider-Man Homecoming, another great introduction, not just playing off the origin story, but just playing off and giving more character development to this character. Thor Ragnarok, again, I'm not a major fan of. I know, shame me in the comments for what it is. But, you know, more development to Thor, Hulk, introducing Valkyrie as well. And then you go to Black Panther, which again, we just met in Civil War. More introduction to him, Wakanda, all the other characters. Then you have Avengers Infinity War, which was just insane, to say the least. That giant war, all these characters finally coming together and it just working and them losing at the end. Us having to wait 2 more films. Avengers Endgame comes, gives us this big epic conclusion to all Phase 3 phases. And most people after the end of that were like, yeah, I'm done. I don't need to see anything else in the MCU. That felt like the most conclusive thing you could possibly give. And that's where I go as far as say, could Kang Dynasty, could Secret Wars build up to the same hype? As of right now, I'm going to say no. I don't think there's a way that they could. But I could be wrong. Trust in Kevin Feige, we shall. And of course, it ends with Spider-Man Far From Home, which I, on a personal bias, I love this. I love Spider-Man Far From Home, mostly because of the way that it touches on Peter having to move into a different part of his life, Mysterio being in there, even though I don't love his motivations, and Zendaya and him finally coming together as one. So I overall loved Phase 3. I think it's the best through line through all the stories you're trying to tell. It's the best run of movies and just best run of anything that they had through all of it. It didn't feel like it was giving us too much. It was just enough MCU stuff. And they really built this world up, introducing a lot of cool things, and really built up to this epic 2-part conclusion between Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And Phase 3 is the best phase of this. And we'll continue to keep going back and ranking these till the MCU just fizzles out and dies. But with that said, guys, let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are on this ranking. Did you guys like it? Did you not? Do you disagree with me? That's fine if you did. Make sure to share your ranking down below. But of course, guys, until next time, stay classy.